Give me 1 second here.
This middle.
All right.
Saw that you were in the chat earlier as well. Hope you were enjoying our conversation about costume and American retail.
It's kind of interesting.
Alrighty, let's have the pop-out viewer here, and we'll show you. Here we are. Hello, everybody in the stream to Maid Mage.
Hope you guys are having a good Thursday.
Yeah, I'm having a great Thursday. How you doing?
Not bad. Yeah, I'm just kind of just sipping my coffee. I'm a little tired, but that's kind of usually kind of a little tired on average, but I'm doing good. Yeah.
Okay. Now, folks, I think I shouted this out on the first stream. One of my dear friends, EXO, helped me out a little with the technology behind getting the streaming setup going, and she recommended Maid Mage as a great person to talk to when it comes to the sort of world of game dev and character design and 3D rigging and stuff like that. You come with a pretty great pedigree and recommendation on that front.
Yeah, it is an honor. I'm glad.
Yeah, well, I'm super happy that you decided to help me out on my first week and be a great guest.
Yeah, of course. What it sounds like you want to do is pretty interesting. I'm not like particularly versed, right, with some of the fashion stuff, and I don't own a lot of like clothes that are like beyond just like kind of like just whatever like generic department store stuff. But I like knowing about it. I kind of follow accounts. I kind of talk about it a little bit. So it's all interesting to me, even though I don't have like the money to like get a wardrobe like that. You know what I mean?
No, I totally understand. It's definitely, I think, a hobby. Like, it's not just like something that you can kind of follow like the news. It's definitely something that, well, one of the things that I think has been in the fashion community's consciousness this last month is this sort of rejection of the idea of finding your personal style, and influencers kind of pushing that as like a big part of what it means to be somebody who's into fashion, of being a fashion hobbyist. That you have to kind of spend money to like sort of discover yourself with clothes. Like, I don't think I'm part of the camp that agrees that like that's not really a very financially like good thing to do, is to blow a lot of money on designer stuff, right? Yeah, it's definitely something I don't think is necessarily needed. This sort of like rush to try to discover yourself or to kind of establish yourself as like a true hobbyist. But a lot of it, I think, is just sitting there and thinking about like, what does this mean in terms of the story that I'm going to be telling with either my style or either like or even just like as a passive consumer of like shows, of runway shows, being like, what is this person trying to express?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what you do. How would you say that your interests are going in these days? Like, what sort of thing is currently super interesting to you in the space of being a 3D specialist, as I think somebody referred to you as.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I do I kind of do like indie games. I haven't really released one like that's like a retail one or anything like that, right? I've mostly been doing like kind of small projects, like they're called like game jams and stuff like that, where it's like kind of like make a game quick, but not really trying to like finish it, I guess, or like you try to finish it, but like you're not trying to like sell it usually. Sure. And because of that, I'm also a 3D modeler. I'm an animator, and so if I make a character that's for that game, I have to design it too, and it's a very like tight time span in order to, you're wearing all these different hats, you're doing all these different jobs, so that's kind of you learn a lot in that process of like trying to do all those different things, make a game, design characters, animate that, all within like usually like sometimes it's a weekend, sometimes it's a month, right? It's usually a very small time frame.
Okay.
But
and are you
right
usually
now,
iterating on like similar themes or stuff like that, or are you trying to like create something that's going to be an exploration of like a technique, for instance, that you haven't done before? Like, is it driven from like, I guess, your personal exploration, or are you trying to like hone towards something?
Sometimes there's a prompt, but usually, like in the game jam, like so for when I make a game, sometimes I'll be given a prompt for like whatever it is, because it's not like a competition, but like other people will be doing it, and so it's like a well, anyways, sometimes there's a theme, and sometimes I have to like kind of go towards that theme, but other times I am kind of like iterating on my old ideas because like it's like, well, I had a weekend to do this one thing, but I had a cool idea back then, and like it might be months later, and I'll try and like I don't know, put a spin on that old idea and recycle it. Um, and so sometimes it's like that, and other times like you're asking, yeah, it's like technique things, things I kind of I wanna try out. Like for example, this last game I did, there's a character that has like a giant jacket that's wrapped around their waist. Um, and so their sleeves are hanging, and then you kind of have like the sides of the jacket that are kind of flapping by their legs and stuff like that. And that's a little bit more complicated to animate. But I've been studying a course on animation rigging, and it kind of inspired me to try and make that jump. And so for that game, I added that as one of the design, like as part of the design for the character.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
For your streaming content, like, what do you try to focus on? Do you bring, the sort of game jam energy and a sort of, I guess, commentary for like doing that kind of stuff on stream?
Yeah, usually if I'm doing a game jam, I'll stream like a majority of it, of the process, and then so sometimes I'll like at the start I'll like talk about it like at the beginning of a jam, so I'm like talking about the process of like starting that project. Sometimes that's like just me like spitballing ideas about what I think the game should be. Sometimes that's me kind of going through I don't know if I've done it too much on stream, but usually at the start of a project, I'll like be on like Pinterest and like looking up a bunch of different things for like visual ideas, just trying to build out like a mood board, um, and then like kind of have like that on like a reference board with just like a bunch of different images and stuff like that, and then try and build a character from it. And sometimes I'll be talking through that process.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I think it's super interesting, like the sort of pipeline that you kind of have to get through to like start making these things like from beginning to end. You said you were working on a animated model with the sort of uh, a a flapping shirt, right? Do you have a chance we could take a look at that?
Oh yeah, the jacket. Yes. Let me pull it up on my Let me open up Blender here, and I can kind of show it off a little bit.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah. While you're getting that up, I think another thing is that like the way that you sort of start the process of coming up with your idea for a character or a game, or the way that a character might fit into a game. Do you kind of think of the two like things separately? Like, would you ever want to design a character that you might bring to different games, different contexts, different spaces?
hmm,
Because that's kind of what like a VTuber is, right? This idea of like a
yeah.
character as like an actor itself, right?
Sometimes it's like the character first, and then it's like the world first. I guess is that what you're kind of like asking about?
Yeah, and like how much of
Hmm.
it like do you want to kind of have as a continuum of like your own work, right? Because there is this idea like with a lot of say big name game directors of like them having like a signature style of the way like a character is or characterization, or basically being like a spiritual sequel or successor to like another like IP even, because of like how much
Hmm.
similar their sort of starting point is. Like regardless of whether or not like if it's the same character, are there like similar starting points that like you go to, or like you feel like you can explore time and time again, or is it really like when you're coming up with like a character for a game, you always try to make up a new character for each game?
Sometimes I have um one of the things for character design for me is like like kind of like how their face looks, and so sometimes I can have like the idea of what a character might look like, their hairstyle, their face, and that can sometimes be like completely unmarried to any project. And so sometimes when I'm starting a new project, I'm like, there's this guy in my head that looks kind of cool. I guess I could dress them up and put them in this world that I'm making for this one, if that makes sense.
Hell yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it is just making up someone completely new for a thing, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
It's almost loaded up.
Nice. The way that like you kind of sort of skin each character for the world, like there's this idea that we talked about during the last stream of like the superhero costume as like sort of workwear adjacent, the sort of use of like a brightly colored outfit that's skin tight and like very graphic designery in terms of like it being almost a decorated shed of not decorated shed. What's the other one? There's this theory from like architecture that things are either in the shape of the thing that they offer, which in as an example they use was like a shop that's shaped like a rubber ducky that sells rubber duckies. And the decorated shed, which is just like a box that's like, got floor space, and one might put like a sign out front describing what you're supposedly selling inside, right? And the sort of idea of the superhero costume being a way for a character who might like have like a family, who might like have a sort of personal life, becoming this iconic symbol of something as a sort of transformational tool. The idea of the superhero costume as like a workwear function, of it being a tool for transformation, more so than clothes, is something that we were taking a look at. And I think, like with a lot of games, obviously the main character gets into a lot of action, right?
Yeah.
So, and of course, in this particular design, this character has like an axe, a guitar with a weapon attachment. There is definitely a expectation of action, and this sort of heroic space, right? I was wondering what you thought about that, of like, thinking about the tradition of these sort of like even superhero adjacent clothes as in being in the same category as like a Carhartt Detroit jacket or like carpenter jeans.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes like when you get into those kind of like costuming, it can be kind of larger than life, right? And sometimes it's like it feels weird for like some characters to be wearing that kind of stuff, because like I think there's this like design trend for like a lot of like gacha games, for example, where they'll kind of incorporate things into the design that don't into their clothing too, that just like doesn't feel like something that would be very comfortable to wear at all, right? But it kind of like it helps like inform kind of their what is it, their job or like their role, I guess. So almost like in a superhero like kind of way. I actually kind of have like a reference of this.
Okay.
Maybe we can. Depends on which way you want to go. If you want to talk about this that I pulled up in a second, but like for example, there's this character here from the game Zone Zero, and this guy's a construction worker, and you can see kind of like he has all these like kind of like construction type costuming on here. There's like obviously like realistic things to have, like a tool belt with like a wrench on it and stuff like that. But then you have this kind of like oversized like metal like thing that's like on his back, and like these like giant clips that are almost like you could picture hanging from like some construction gear, but like for some reason he's wearing them.
Yeah, no, it makes sense in the sense that like it, like that's sort of getting into the idea of the superhero costume having like a sort of thematic bent where it might give like a hint or like a tip of the hand towards like what powers they have, or
Mhm.
like maybe like their tragic heroic backstory or something like that, right?
Sure.
Um, and I'm not necessarily sure like how much they matter in as much of it, like say offering any sort of like armor like qualities, like the fact that he's like wearing this thing that he probably shouldn't be wearing with these clamps, like that's not necessarily either being a weapon or something for protection for like the execution of like whatever violence that he needs to do to be an action man.
Mhm.
But it is, I think, something of a signifier of a kind to describe. Again, like I think this word it used, larger than life. It's hard to kind
Mhm.
of like tie that to like the way that like, for instance, military uniforms work, right? I don't know if you've seen like
Mhm.
in person, like the size of like a commander's or I don't really know necessarily anything about the military and how ranks work, but whenever like
Yeah.
you see like an admiral wear like a hat, that is comical. Those things are like very weirdly shaped if you see them in person. They're like extremely big, almost as big as like the full head of the person who's wearing it, right? Or at least their face.
It really does. It like it flares out kind of in a ridiculous a ridiculous amount. I feel like some of them can.
Yeah. And that's obviously to like denote a degree of tradition and authority that comes along with that tradition and institutional power. But with superhero stuff, like even like the superfluousness of something can be an attempt to signify somebody to like a layperson or a passerby or a possible civilian, right, to whatever incident that they're involved in. That there's something. It's definitely transformative in a way that's like I don't think necessarily that's traditionally spoken of in a fashion or styling context, right?
Sure.
It's disruptive in a way, but in a sort of way that kind of draws attention to oneself and shows that they're not out of place, but out of a different context. So yeah, over the top, larger than life. Struggling
Mhm.
again to come up with the correct terminology for describing the function of this outfit.
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes it's like I mean like it's something like this like feels very impractical, but I don't know, there's like a certain flair to it that
Mhm.
kind of just like I don't know, just makes it kind of interesting to look at generally, I think.
Yeah, I mean the pants themselves are
Mhm.
flared.
Oh yeah. Actual flair, yeah.
Okay, so in terms of say this model that you've been working on, taking influence from this other video game character, what would you say were like the things that you started from? Like, did you start with like this flare shape?
Well, this was just like kind of more about like the other thing. This is kind of its own thing, I guess, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um, but um, so for this character, actually, this was for a game where I knew we kind of wanted to like have a music theme to it, hence the guitar. And we wanted to be like a fighting game. You're not like a fighting game, but like a game with fighting, an action game. Um, and so I started from the idea is like I kind of want to have like a character that's kind of like a feels like a Japanese rock star. Specifically, what I had in mind initially was Visual K.
Yes. Yes.
That kind of that movement. And so I had a friend, Gabber Code. She's a 2D artist, and she was on the team, and so she sketched out a bunch of ideas, and then we kind of ended up here with this character. He did some concept art, tried a bunch of different costuming that was more like an actual like kind of like Visual K artist, and then I kind of moved a little bit away from that, to try and add, I guess, like make it feel a little bit more believable, the action part of it. And so I added like stuff like if I hide the skeleton, you can kind of see like the scarring and whatnot, and the bandage wraps and stuff like that to make it feel a little bit more like violent, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
We were
there's
talking a
there's
little bit earlier during the like Lord of the Rings video about like
Mhm.
sort of markings of distressing, of like a character's attempts, or at least an amateur's attempts to like repair clothing that they might, have like stitches and mendings in certain areas as like a way of like referring to the authenticity of the character's hard life and being a man of action. What do you think of
Mm.
that sort of like purposeful distressing as like a vehicle for storytelling? And I can't really make out due to like the darkness of the garment, but do you have in any case any attempts of repair on the garment?
Not quite any like repair necessarily. I've never really thought about that too much in my own work, but I've heard people talk about it before, and it's nice because it really does make it's like it adds like a level of realness to it. Someone that takes care of their stuff instead of just like, for example, this character here kind of has this jacket here. You can kind of see how there's a little bit of a. I'll hide the body a little bit so you can kind of see it a little bit nicer. But
Mhm.
there's all these jagged and torn edges to kind of, you know, make it feel more like a character that like gets into like some fights or something like that. You know what I mean?
Hell
So
yeah.
it's not just like a style thing.
And
Something
when
that has been used, not just pull off of a clothing rack.
definitely when it's in like I guess motion in the actual environs
Mhm.
of the game, in the game environment, is there physics to it such that like you get a lot more motion due to the fact that we have this skirting?
Mhm. So I would like to experiment more with physics bones and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But that's just like something like from a technical standpoint. Um, that's kind of been holding me back because generally, I guess I just haven't really looked too much into like cloth physics and like bone physics too much. I have like a little bit on my character's hair. You can kind of see it sway very minimally.
Yeah.
I kind of reduced it. It's at a very low amount because it can kind of get a little like extra. It can be a little bit too much sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Especially
Because I
if, like,
guess
for instance, this character were only, shown from a third person behind the shoulder view,
Mhm.
like
It is actually
extra
a third
movement
person
wasn't.
game. It was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, and to the point of like it not needing repairs, a character like this who's like in a rock band, like they may or may not give a shit about keeping
Yeah.
their garments or even their instruments in fine condition. Like famously, Jimi Hendrix at the end of some shows would light his guitar on fire, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe that makes sense of like this sort of like guy who makes it through a fight and his clothes are totally shredded and he just goes to Walmart and buys some new clothes for the next
Yeah.
day. He never uses a washing machine. His clothes always somehow disintegrate by the next evening.
Mm.
So, yeah,
So
there's even considerations I think you can make in terms of like how your character treats clothing and like their relationship and their interiority with how they select and treat their clothing. With a game, like very rarely do you see like alternate costumes or like street clothes or like maybe some sort of uniform for a character. Have you ever had an occasion for a character to appear in different costumes?
no, not really. I think it's something I've thought about for like long-term projects for sure.
Mhm.
I think um also before we quickly move on to this, I do want to take a quick second. So yeah, I didn't do physics for this one for the jacket, but I did like manually animate a lot of that. So let me see if I can one of these. I guess it's like hidden right now. But it does like actually kind of. I have some animations where you can kind of see where it does. Let's see if I can load one. Not that one clearly. I guess let me try and find that run animation. There we go. You can kind of see I did end up animating the jacket kind of myself, kind of flapping a little bit. Not too convincingly because I just I'm not that experienced with like animating that kind of thing. But I did end up so yeah, just doing that myself to have the flapping kind of go. You can
Nice,
kind of
nice.
see it. It's a little exaggerated. um,
Yeah,
but
sometimes with I think the sort of style of where it's very animation inspired, right? A
mm,
lot of folks like do interesting things with like frame rate or like the physics of certain things to sort of uh, kind of emulate the look you got with like 12 frames per second animation. Are you doing any sort of tricks like
mm,
that were like that are kind of a lot more subtle than
mm.
I appear?
So um, it's 3D animation, and so you kind of animate keyframes, and like the computer can kind of like bridge the gap between like those points. It
Mhm.
interpolates is the term. And so generally, people will in game animation they'll animate at 30 FPS. Because it scales up to 60 nicely. Which is like kind of the standard 30 FPS and 60 for like running games, right? But something that traditional like 2D animation usually kind of limits themselves in like 24 frames per second. And sometimes will change like how frequently those frames will update in that 24. So like animating a ones, twos, or threes, for example, right? Um, so personally, I animate at 24 frames per second to kind of more mimic that 2D uh, 2D style.
Sure.
Mhm.
Um, I think a thing that's also interesting is that like there's this idea of like a graphical budget in like video games and in 3D works, where if you have a certain amount of say polygons for your main character model that you're going to be interacting with the world with, that you don't really have as much like computational or video resources for like other characters, enemies, crowds, etc., stuff like that. Do you have any sort of like special thing that you do with a main character or a player character in terms of like designing their look and designing like how much business they have with their clothes going on? Like for instance, this guy's skirt flapping in the wind. Um, would you say that like in terms of designing an enemy or something like that, you also take into consideration like like a sort of lowering in the budget of like polygons or the complexity of costume or something like that?
Mhm. So when it comes to like that kind of thing, I do keep in mind I can like kind of for example, if I swap my view here, it's hard to see because I'm kind of blocking it, so I'll just take a screenshot right now. But if I take the screenshot and I blow it up on my screen, um I can kind of see a vertex count, so I can see how many polygons that this is for example this character is taking up. So right now it's what 25,000 verts is currently what it is. And generally, what I'll like to try and do is keep like all the characters kind of in a similar range of how much. Um, Based on what I've seen other games do, I'm generally pretty safe to have a character be in um like a 20k to 100k range
Sure.
um for vertices, and it's usually fine. I don't think I need to go anywhere near like 100k vertices for my work. But if I were to do that, it would be fine for performance just because it's like that's what other games do for all their different characters. I kind of I've looked at I've ripped some of them from certain games myself, and analyze like their counts and stuff like that, see how different they might be. Because some designs do demand more vertices, right? Like for
Mhm.
example, this character that has like a second jacket, right? That's an entire other clothing item. Um, that would add more to their budget, shall we say? But I guess like computers have gotten like really good at like rendering like polygons and stuff like that.
Sure.
So it's not too much of a concern nowadays, unless I'm doing some like crazy Unreal Engine like like
Right.
shaders and stuff
Well,
like that. Other things like that will bog down. Yeah.
I was coming at it more from like a I guess a design level, right? Like are the actual
Sure.
designs for enemies, crowds, mobs, background, world building, that sort of thing, like non-player characters that your player may interact with, do you consciously like limit the sort of detail of the design to that, where you go more archetypal, you go more focused towards a particular shape than like filling out a detail, or like does every sort of character you design kind of require the same level of consideration and thinking about like the interiority and the monologue of the of this character, right? how much resolution there is, I guess, on a design level versus on a polygon level.
Right. Well, generally I'll try and put the most time in into the player character, and then like other characters, I will kind of have to kind of rush them along. I've generally had to like make enemies really quickly. I found.
Yeah.
But
is that like a sort of thing that you
do,
want to kind of keep within your, like, I guess, purview as the person who worked on the character? Like, you want to also always design the enemy. If, like, you say you're working on a team and you've got like a level designer helping you out, is the level designer sometimes designing some of the characters and or mobs and or enemies that are in the game world?
I think I haven't really worked with other people that have made a lot of assets in a long time. I've been doing a lot of solo work. I've done some like small team stuff, but I haven't really done had like another artist on the team that was making like back then I was doing pixel art. So I had another artist that would do pixel art for different enemies and stuff, and back then we'd talk about like, oh, we want to keep a similar scale. So like I'd give them the aspect ratio of the pixel, like, or the resolution I was working at, and they'd copy that, and then we'd try and keep a similar color palette. But you know, we were pretty small, so we didn't have that we didn't have someone that would like go over and like do a correction to make sure everything was like the same, you know what I mean? But like ideally you would like that, you know, someone to uniform the color palette and make sure that it looks like similar enough, I guess, right? The consistency, you know what I mean?
Yeah, or like a style by
Yeah.
coming from what's supposed to be influencing the visual character design.
Yeah, I mean, generally we'll share like our references and stuff like that, but you know, something like that feels the kind of thing you do in like a year long or a multi-year type project, you know? Things that I've always thought about but never had quite the time to really put into action, I guess, you know what I mean?
Sure, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
See, what else did I have a question about in terms of like, okay, so let's say you come up with this for this particular character. Did you come up with like the design of this character first, or did like you said you came up with, I guess, like the idea of the actor first, then you put him into a costume, and I think you said that the particular like theme of the project you were developing was around this sort of music thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you gave him the guitar and everything that goes along with that guitar, like as part of their of this digital actor's costume for this project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's like a great example of like the sort of world influencing this character. Do you have any other like designs from this project?
Let's see. Let me I can pull it up on my other thing.
Or I guess influences. We can either go downstream or upstream. I don't really necessarily know where this particular costume kind of came into the picture for this digital actor.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of I don't know. I just kind of went with something that I thought would look cool for the actual costume of this character, I guess.
Yeah.
But we had like some kind of influence. For example, let me pull up some concept art that we had from some of the other people on the team. Let's see. It is somewhere in here. Some of the images are taking a second to load.
That's cool. Let's go to the chat. I haven't clicked on them in a second.
Yeah.
Hi, folks who have joined for the first time. Great to see y'all here. If you're enjoying the fashion content, have some emojis. Don't really know the context of those. And hello, Planet Bluto. Hello, Flickstatic. Hello, Yumiku. I'm glad you're here for this stream. Okay, here we go. Here's some concept art.
So there's this other character that I had a friend Tier. We were all on the team. We had like each person. There's a bunch of different people, including Planet Pluto, who was in the chat. We're responsible for different characters, and so this my friend Tier, he was gonna write like some like DJ inspired songs, and so these were some of the like sketches he made early on with like, oh, we have like some kind of DJ character that maybe throws discs around, and they had like a deck taped to their arm and stuff like that. So yeah.
This is awesome. Yeah. I'm seeing here like is that I'm trying to parse. Is that like more of a helmet or more like a beanie that the characters got with sort of?
It looks like a. I always thought it was like some kind of like motorcycle helmet to me. It kind of looked like. I remember he did end up. I don't have a picture of it, but he did end up modeling a simplified design of this character, where they ended up. Like you see, there's like accessories, like they have like these speakers that are taped to their legs, like that kind of. We got down to like a time crunch, and so all of that kind of went away, and it was just this guy in like a tracksuit and like a motorcycle helmet, kind of. And I think it was like supposed to be a little like Daft Punk type, a little bit with the motorcycle helmet. But
I see.
Yeah,
okay. Like a cyborg DJ is the idea, right?
Sorry, what was that?
A cyborg DJ is the idea, right?
Maybe.
He's got like a little chess computer with wires coming out of it. It looks like, or maybe some sort of like mixer, CDJ. So this being in context with like the rocker character, like I guess what's the vision of the gameplay for this? I don't think I asked about that yet.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like it was just like you'd be fighting these different kind of musicians, and they would be playing their own like kind of song genre thing. And so it was kind of this idea of like it's like almost like you pull up like Daft Punk and you're like listening to one of their tracks or something like that, and then they're like shooting lasers at you or something as you're fighting them, or imagine like fighting like Lady Gaga herself while you're listening to her music. It's like that kind of seemed like a funny idea to us.
Yeah, that's definitely something where like you have the different brands and the different genres and the trappings and the visual stylings, like of kind of what's the word? Not artifacts, but the stylings of each genre have to like kind of apply to the different player characters. I guess this is a player character, not an enemy. Like this isn't a boss.
Well, actually, the idea was that they would kind of double, where you could play as them and you could fight them. Yeah,
definitely. Because you said earlier fighting game-esque, but then you corrected yourself. I didn't know if it was like a sort of player thing.
Yeah, it was for this game called. It was like a boss rush jam thing. So it was you would be able to play with your friends, and then you would fight. You get to play as the characters, and then you could also fight one of them, who would be like the boss, and then they would be like powered up and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like Lady Gaga and people like Daft Punk, they have their own sort of like in-house image making team that is creating like a world for like their music and for their an aesthetic for their fans to kind of enjoy. It's definitely, I think, a large appeal of like the big budget pop artists is that they have whole art direction teams just of themselves, and to kind of see like what looks like completely different styles, time periods, inspirations like clash, whether it's the sort of punk aesthetic of the 3D character you showed or this cyborg DJ thing, like even if they were in different like art styles completely with different color palettes, and there was like a lack of congruity on that end, like it could even make sense because they are coming from different worlds with their own fan bases, with their own subcultures that they're drawing from, right? And in terms of like doing sort of a design influenced originally at least by the visual kei subculture, how do you like approach research or stuff like that versus when it's like either drawn from inspiration from the real world or from like another video game, for instance?
Well, usually I like pulling up like a giant reference board. I really like kind of just like casting as wide of a net for my inspirations as I possibly can. And so one of the things I'll do is I don't know, if I'm asking for like a game and a genre type, sometimes I'll ask a bunch of different friends like, oh, what are your favorite like hack and slash games or something like that. And I'll look at how those characters kind of look or like, oh, what's your favorite like sci-fi games or horror games? And I've asked that, and people have told me all these different things. Because like I can only play so many different games, so I like talking to different people, seeing what they do, and then I'll go on Pinterest, and Pinterest will just show me a bunch of different stuff, and then I'll kind of put it all together into a reference board that I can use for myself. So let me see if I can find exactly. Okay, for example, here is this. Here's a reference board for this project, for example, and so you can kind of see what is it? Some of the different like things I pulled off of Pinterest, and like for example, this like an Instagram post, right, of like different like kind of like rock stuff, and then I pulled into like some like kind of DMC, for example, is one a character from Devil May Cry,
Yeah,
and then Guilty Gear, and just kind of like put all of these together side by side, and that kind of helped visualize and create the design for that our rocker character over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a bit of a departure from Visual K, which is like very Faye-like. You've got this idea of like the super live, bloomy, like soft-featured people with like these sort of kind of spiked out highlight hair and super tight leather things. And there's
we definitely lost that, I think.
Yeah, we went away from that.
These were more of those original concepts, like I said, by our other artist, Gab, who came up with these, and pretty much I don't know. I just kind of just kept the hairstyle. Ultimately, it was what ended up being the main thing that stayed between it, and then like I don't know, the feeling of leather, but that was about it.
Yeah. Talk about like in terms of like when you're trying to model like the like texture of different textiles in the game. Like, do you feel like that's like something that you put a lot of time in, or you think is important in terms of like trying to come up with a way that a texture feels for like a character?
So this actually ties into something that you're asking me about a little bit before, about like kind of like budget. So one thing for me as an artist, I've kind of put a certain like stylistic like limit on myself, which kind of helps me like because I do a bunch of different things.
Sure.
And as a result, I don't have like as much time to develop texturing styles. And so what I find sometimes is it's difficult for me to convey material and like different costuming details like that, or like something like a jacket might just feel like a silhouette rather than having visible seams and stuff like that. And that's something that I feel like is a weak point for me as an artist. And part of that is just because I haven't really spent a lot of time texturing. One thing you'll notice about my character is a lot of flat coloring, very little shading, right? And this kind of low detail kind of stylization lets me stay fast and let me do a lot of different things. But as a result, right, you miss the believability of certain texture types and like material types, right? And that's also partially a limit from using anime cell shading, where there's a lower focus on the material work with that kind of rendering style.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like there's this idea of like the demake that kind of was a thing in vogue for like productions with on purpose lower visual fidelity in terms of like I guess whatever, like polygons or something like that, but not out of like necessarily just the limitation of like having a small team and having a fewer amount of people tackling like a smaller scale project, but also the idea of like pointing towards like this sort of PlayStation 2 era Max as like the sort of high watermark of creativity, and like this sort of like explosion of free thought in the video game space as it kind of sort of got more taken over by AAA developers and the sort of like ultra high fidelity AAA expensive titles. That's like a cultural shift in the indie scene that gravitated towards pixel graphics and the PlayStation 2 era demake looking graphics that was even referenced for Balenciaga's campaign, and I think summer of
Oh, really?
2021 or something like that. They released a campaign of their runway show that was demade to like look like PlayStation 2 graphics. It's definitely something that resonates with the youth energy of young creatives that I think reverberates through a lot of even what the big fashion houses are looking at, right?
Hmm. Well, I
And
can't.
what would you say to like that sort of movement of like trying to make demakes? Or I think
Hmm.
there was like a project on Twitter that was trying to like recreate the look of digital cameras for like a action first person shooter game. Of looking at
Oh, yeah.
specifically like the low like dynamic range like tiny sensor CCD cameras versus like the modern CMOS cameras for like the shooter game, and really trying to
Hmm.
like get back to like mid aughts level graphics. What would you think about like that sort of movement?
Hmm. Well, I think like part of it is there is like an edge of nostalgia to it, right? A lot of these people coming in and kind of wanting to make games like the ones they grew up with, right? There's definitely a lot of that. But there's also the feasibility aspect of it. Generally speaking, these lower fidelity stuff are just more. They're just a lot easier to get into when it comes to creating yourself. A low poly model like the PlayStation era or the N64 era is something that most people could learn how to do in a weekend. But trying to make a model like in a AAA game, that takes a lot more experience, of course. And
Yeah, there's
so
definitely that
for
garage
a lot of
band punk rock element of like, hey, we just need the power chords, right?
yeah, definitely. It's like it's accessible and easy to get into, but that um that doesn't mean it can't be made to look cool. Hence why it's low fidelity, not necessarily low quality. You can put a lot of effort into that stylization. Something that took like teams of people to make back in the year 2000 can pretty much be done by one person now, in a lot less time on their computer with just the modern tools we have, which I think is pretty cool and probably why we see so much of it.
Yeah, yeah. The idea of like the Super Nintendo, or like not Super Nintendo, but maybe first generation of Nintendo and the NES developers being able to turn around a product like Final Fantasy in 6 months versus 6 years is like the scale of production is so different
Mm,
in comparison to like what we see in mainstream gaming from like a Call of Duty,
mm.
Activision Blizzard product, right?
They've
And then like
basically become like
it's
movie
sort of
studios in scale, I think.
repeat that. I'm sorry.
It's like these game companies are almost like in scale with like movie studios, basically.
Oh yeah, and by far, like I think
Hmm.
the budget of something like a GTA would like outspend by multiple that of like the most expensive Marvel movie. Nobody's really
Yeah.
competing with these budgets.
Hmm.
But like, do you feel like because big companies like you know uh Balenciaga, and like if they made it all the way to Balenciaga, I guarantee you there's like some probably AAA company that's similarly doing something with that aesthetic. Do you think that like it kind of cheapens or in any way harms the perception of people who like make low resolution graphics to be associated with the fact that this is like a growing mainstream trend now?
Mm, I mean, I've seen some people like kind of I don't know, get tired of the trend, which kind of makes sense. It's like when you see more of it, there's more haters will kind of come out, just because it's like saturation, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think maybe like the most annoying thing for me personally, it's like a minor pet peeve of mine. It doesn't actually bother me genuinely. It's just something I like joking about. Is the result of all this kind of like the mainstreamness of it is kind of like there's like a dilution of what it means. People will call things PlayStation 2 that aren't PlayStation 2. the stuff that genuinely would have come out like 10 years later, right? Or things that came out 10 years earlier than PlayStation 2, something like N64, and that like it's kind of all been put under the same umbrella, which makes it kind of difficult for me. I'm a 3D artist that likes helping out other artists that are trying to get into learning 3D. Sometimes they're like, I want to get that like kind of PlayStation aesthetic, but sometimes they're meaning something completely different. Just because, I don't know, the more mainstream it's become, like the less the words mean what they're supposed to mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a big part of I think every subculture is that like when people who aren't in the subculture, find a crossover example of a hit that they connect with, it can kind of lead to them using words developed by that subculture in a way that they were not meant to be used, and it's the most annoying nails on chalkboard shit when that starts happening around you.
I try to do my due diligence and like kind of research it a little bit, but I'll get things wrong, of course, because it's like I obviously don't have time to like engross myself in some of those things, but I try to do my best.
But yeah, when you see like examples like Crow Country and say Mouthwashing, like these big games from last year, like sort of embrace that aesthetic. Like you think it's a good thing because it'll bring more people to the space, but also that it might cause like the idea of needing to kind of escalate the aesthetic a little bit more, draw it more into like extreme versions of what like before were homages, and now we have to like evolve as a person in the subculture towards more and more extreme versions of the like the signifiers and impulses of like that medium. Would you say that?
No, I'm not really sure entirely what you mean there.
Sorry, I kind of lost the vocabulary for a second. I don't think I explained my question very well. So you have like a lot of like arms raceness usually when like, a scene gets big, where like what's the instead of like say in music, right? If the mainstream gets like wind and popularizes a super distorted sound, there becomes usually an arms race of seeing who can get more distorted, even sometimes past the point of listenability, past the point of it being like what we consider traditionally musically sound or enjoyable, even. Definitely there's some leaning into like for something like low res, this idea of like losing more and more definition until like it becomes an extreme version of that form. Do you in any way ever feel that impulse to try to like push towards a more extreme version of the thing that you're doing for the next project?
I mean, so I think I might be as an artist myself. I am currently trying to move towards like higher fidelity stuff. And like kind of more on par with like a double A type of a style. Personally, just because as I've improved as an artist is something I've been more interested in. But I can definitely see that like kind of almost arms raceness. I've noticed there's a lot of like I feel like a lot of these like these low poly stuff have been kind of leaning into the horror and like kind of like that kind of ugliness, kind of a bit of it's that I think that's pushed by like this publisher New Blood, and they're like Doom inspired stuff with Ultra Kill, and then you have kind of games in that kind of aesthetic that have kind of been more popping up. And like I think there's that one game, Buckshot Roulette, right? And so I feel like I've noticed a lot of new developers try and remake that and kind of arms race towards this like pixelated, low poly, very very grungy and a little gory. And like for better or worse, I like it, but I can see why people are getting tired of it. Because I've definitely heard people getting tired of that look.
Yeah. And I think like as like an artist, generally you do what you can to avoid what is already in the marketplace, right?
But ultimately, you still have your own tastes, and a lot of that will be like screw what other people think. I'm kind of a small creator. I'm just gonna do what I want because that'll be like if you do something you're more interested in, you'll be more successful at it generally. So sometimes you'll do something in a saturated field or something that's been done before, and you don't really care if it's not unique because it's something you can do. Some of us aren't even really thinking about being able to sell a product, more about delivering a product. Especially for some of us that have only really been in this for like, I don't know, like a year or two, right?
Sure. Talking about, your influences and kind of where you're coming from, how did you get into like making 3D stuff?
Well, I I was kind of always interested in making games. Did a little bit of programming in university, and then ended up here. And as a result, I had an eye for art, but I hadn't really trained in art. I didn't do a lot of drawing. I tried 2D first for a little while. I tried picking up 2D. Like I said, I did pixel art for a bit. But it kind of frustrated me, and I just kind of tried out doing pixel art. I tried doing 2D art. I tried drawing, and none of it was really clicking. Part of that was like a mechanical thing where like I just couldn't train my hand to use like a pen very well. It's taken a long time to get there. But for 3D art, that didn't entirely matter. There's more precision in the 3D tools, right? Using a mouse and kind of, if I wanted to, kind of edit like by decimal point the position of something. That made it easier for me to get into making art in 3D art. So it's part of it was I already liked 3D art, and also the fact that I tried other things and they didn't work out. So 3D art just kind of came naturally to me.
Was there a particular like tool where like you picked it up and you were like, oh, okay, I can actually do this? Or was it like following step-by-step tutorials on YouTube? Like, what was like the key part where it sort of clicked or was like, okay, this is something I can put 10,000 hours into?
Well, I learned Blender, which is a free 3D modeling software and animation software and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just kind of chipped away at it, and eventually, it was more like it wasn't it didn't take long for it to no longer be a struggle. When it comes to learning things, I feel like it's kind of like getting on a bike and riding it every single day. And when it came to 3D art, that annoying part where it's like, I'm not getting this, I'm falling over, that went away fairly quickly for 3D art compared to, for example, drawing, right?
Yeah, that's, I think, like, definitely, like, it feels like, this is like I think a wacky word to say, but like, talent is like a thing with like specific tools, right? You can kind of have like an ability to like, put in like a certain amount of hours, and then you start like stop seeing the tool as like a barrier between what you want to express and like, the artwork, right? Like how quick is the mind going to the product versus going towards the struggling with tooling, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like some things just come naturally to other people, right? And for this, it's like I really do feel like Blender has become almost like an extension of myself in a way. I've just used it so much that it really just does feel natural to move around in it and make things in it.
Is there like a strong community aspect to it as well? Because I know it's like an open source sort of situation, and there must be like endless plugins and like third party things, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think the nice thing about it is like since it's a free software and it's open source too. Whenever I've wanted to learn how to do something or I've had an issue, there's almost always been something I could find online for free, or someone I could talk to that could help me out, through either like different Discord servers or stuff like that. I find myself kind of drawn towards that. Like I use Unity, for example, as a game engine, and it's a very similar feeling with Unity, where there's just a wealth of resources out there compared to something like Unreal Engine, which is more like an industry thing. So a lot of that industry thing, like the advice is kind of like company secret almost. There's not
Oh,
as
wow.
many not as many people talking about how to do things in Unreal as there is in Unity.
Okay. I think that like this idea of like a community is super important to like being able to have a really like folk movement, right? Because like there's the idea
Hmm.
of like amateur in which you're like making stuff basically on spec with the expectation of someday reaching the industry versus like a folk art. Like, you know, you have folk musicians who do not like it's not part of their wheelhouse to sort of have this idea of being a professional musician as much as like as music being made as a pastime, right?
Hmm.
This sort of like either it being a cottage industry or just not trying to get into like it being the machine of like the commercial industry, right? And the idea of like 3D art evolving and maturing with like its own community to a like a folk practice on more than just like as like a remnant of like the I don't know CAD or architecture or movie making or game making apparatus. Like it's not just a tool for that. It's something that can be kind of used as like a folk tool. Is I think a compelling idea that could happen in the next decade, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I've even like a lot of the artists I know, definitely kind of more of that. Like a lot of them lean onto that kind of folk aspect of I'm doing this for myself, you know, or like I'm just making this for myself. Some people that aren't really trying to kind of move upwards into an industry type position. I kind of walk the line a bit. A lot of the things that I learn are taking note from industry and incorporating in my own indie stuff. Um, I've kind of positioned myself where if I ever had to leave whatever my indie work, that I could train myself up for an industry position within probably less than a year and start applying. So I kind of walk that line a bit between uh, trying to become like another employee in a company or doing my own thing, if that makes sense. I've built my
Yeah.
skills that way.
Think it's definitely like this sort of push and pull between like an industry. When you get into any sort of industry, when we talk about capitalism, when we talk about like how companies are set up, like it's always a push and pull between like, okay, I can devote my life to this, but I feel like if I get into the industry, it almost like will almost inherently start becoming more about the way the industry does things and the way like would be the most optimal way in an artistic sense to like express it or pipeline even or process even of doing something. And there are some folks who like don't want to engage in that sort of industrial process versus a bit more of an artisanal feel, right? An artisanal mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you're an artisan when you make stuff like this, or like is it still from the perspective of like trying to follow, industry norms when you can, especially in your role as like a streamer and somebody who like positions themselves as somebody who can kind of be an educator?
I mean, like artisanal. If I kind of called myself an artisan, I feel like that. I don't know. Maybe it has a lot of weight. Feels a little pretentious if I called myself that.
Handcrafted,
I,
handmade 3D goods. It is though, right?
but like I understand it though. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, um, I guess I haven't really given that too much thought.
Yeah. There's also like the idea of like it being, an artisan's workshop where it's not necessarily like a one man band only type deal where like, you have to work by yourself with no assistance in order to go for something like that. But if you were to put together a team like, I think there definitely would be a different process of like, trying to build an artisanal expression versus trying to do
mm,
something that might be scalable.
yeah, generally it's like art at that like for I guess let's say we're at a AAA company.
Mhm.
That would be kind of more almost factory line. Some companies completely like I think like a company like Riot Games with League of Legends, for example, they're kind of now like they'll commission and contract other companies to design concept art, and then sometimes they're building that actual model in game, like for the in game model, like in house, like with their own developers, and sometimes they're even contracting that out now. It feels like they've been leaning towards a lot of like I guess like divvying up their workload to other companies, which is a little people are being critical of it right now because they've done a lot of layoffs, but there's a factory line kind of almost like a a Manhattan Project feeling to it, where it's being all like split up into these different places on a need to know basis.
Oh,
So like
wow.
for me, I do everything kind of like like from the whole step of process. But like some people might be like, "Hi, I'm a modeler. This other company just dropped a concept art for me, and I have to design or I have to model it, right?" And then I ship that off to another employee, and then they do the texturing, and that gets shipped off to another person. They do the animating and the rigging, and then that gets shipped off to the company, and then they, they put it in the game, right? And it's kind of like factory lined. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's the
Different
same thing with like
experience.
with fashion and the idea of like because like for instance like even the biggest fashion houses like Louis Vuitton, they might make like a design for a shirt, right? But the shirt
Mhm.
is like one object that they put together for the runway show, and that's a runway sample that they may not have even done in house. Pattern making, fabric, all this stuff might be contracted out of different employees versus an artisanal idea of like making the product top to bottom, from like the mold of a shoe to like, burnishing the leather for the final product, right? This sort of idea of like we control not necessarily vertical integration, but we control much of the like crafting process as we can, and like instead of this assembly line type deal, there is like I think um, it, it seems like kind of crazy that like that it could happen like something as minute as like a different person textures like a
Yeah.
model versus like
Um,
does like the animation.
hmm. Well,
But
I mean, animation is a very specialized thing ultimately, especially the higher up you go. Like I animate, but I'm not like the best animator, you know.
okay,
Mhm.
do you? I guess do you have like a well? I guess talk more generally about like the idea of community and the importance of
Mm.
community and like the sort of like a relationship to the actual like process of how the work gets completed.
Mm. Well, for me, since I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, I don't always get to dedicate all my time to like a certain thing.
Mhm.
Um, I know plenty of game devs that pretty much are just programming day in and day out, and so sometimes when I have a problem, I'm like, oh, this guy is like way more experienced than me at this. Let me try and ask them about it. I definitely rely on the connections I've built, the community that I've kind of surrounded myself with to help kind of push me forward in all those different tiny trades that I found myself kind of like sitting in between, right? And it's nice to rely on someone, lean on their shoulder for one thing, and then usually it's like if someone needs help with something, if I can't answer it, then I redirect them to someone that can. And it's a nice like two-way relationship that's made. It's not a one-way thing where I'm only asking for help from different people. I'm 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 thankful to give back, I think.
So it's great. I think that's like the biggest thing that kind of separates the sort of assembly line method from like the sort of creativity that a small one shop stop artisanally minded person can offer is that like nobody makes it by themselves regardless, but it's about like what the relationship is to like the sort of different inputs that are coming in, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think I had any more questions more specifically that I had planned, but one thing that I did want to do is I wanted to kind of watch like a runway show with you and kind of get your thoughts on like first of all like what you make of like the designs, but also like what you think of them as like 3D objects and how like you might express that in like a modeling type way, like with like a 3D object
Mhm.
versus like its existence as as like a physical piece of clothing, right? Because what I'm about to show you is like pretty obviously totally impractical to wear, but yeah, you'll see, I guess.
All right, yeah,
You're down for
yeah,
that?
bring it on.
Okay.
Um,
I have a runway show for a Japanese brand called, I've never heard it pronounced in real life, but I think
Okay.
it's like pronounced Unreal Age or something like that. Let me see if I can't pull up the activity mode here in Discord. I'll go to watch together, and let's take a look here.
all right, yeah, I can click join.
Okay.
All right.
How do we make it play? Make it play full screen for both of us. How do we do that?
Oh, I've got a full screen on my end, so
Okay.
yeah.
So, I'm playing it. I guess I would be watching it. When you push play, did we both see it play at the same time? Yeah, it looks like. Yeah, because you just.
If I click pause, did it just pause for? Wait, no, I don't think it. Wait. Oh, I don't have control. It's fine.
Okay. Well, regardless, it's playing right now. So, fun fact about this collection: you brought up Daft Punk as an influence for one of the characters in your games. I think they broke up, but one of the members, Thomas Bangalter, I believe, or the other one, I forget which one, they did some of the music for this runway show.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So the setting of the runway shows are actually usually an important part of like the storytelling of the brand, obviously, and they've chosen to do so in like I believe this is in Paris, a church with like these like stained glass windows, right? This idea of like creating these pixels of color to like create a design for like a saint or whatever, and then it being backlit in the same way that an LCD monitor is, right? And you'll start seeing the designs coming down the runway. So you see here, this is Minecraft Steve level shit, right?
Yeah. I think one thing I think about sometimes is the kind of like the shoulder silhouette. Sometimes it is a little comical here, but sometimes you'll have a character that is kind of more fit towards this broad shouldered thing in 3D, and you can't like a human wearing it would feel weird. Sometimes there's like we get to play with the proportions in a 3D sense to kind of make this feel like it would fit more I guess realistically in a way, or not realistically, but stylishly more. Some of these don't feel all that flattering for some of these people's bodies, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
As you may or may not
we can
see,
play with that as a 3D artist.
Yeah. What are you noticing as part of like the sort of concepts presented in the prints? Because we had one print that was like looked like the sort of like a screen that you might get on like a TV broadcast.
I see that. The stripes there.
Yeah. You have and then like you have the floral designs, which like very like crudely imitate traditional like fabric jacquards that have like flowers and being inspired by nature and that. So one of the first computers ever, obviously, was for a jacquard machine for not printing but weaving designs into fabrics with punch cards, right? And I think this collection is all about tying together this sort of heritage of computers and computer-generated art and imagery with the weaving technology that the sort of punch card stuff, computerized digitization, kind of arose from, right?
Sure, it feels like the way that they've done it's like all these dots feels very like dot matrix of that like that older display type. I think with the like how it's all so grid-like, you know?
Yeah. And there's an element of what we were discussing earlier about the demake and the idea of like, going back to Monkey almost with like the very blocky and I guess more geometric sculptural forms, right? So in terms of like character design and storytelling, you have any commentary on like what you're seeing here?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm noticing now that it's like smoothened out, but like yeah, I mean sometimes I will try and like actually like kind of push things to be a little bit sharper, like some of these designs are, and kind of like almost like kind of a little unrealistic. I think I'm thinking about that one model that came down, and the pants on their legs kind of like they kind of like shot out diagonally, and their hands were kind of resting on it, where it kind of flared out around their like knee and thigh area. I can't remember where, to like kind of make it, I guess, like more horizontal.
Yeah, there's I think also with like this sort of way that some of the like later cuts like draped the shoulders down and more suggested like a kimono sleeve versus like Minecraft, that there is like a degree of wearability in some of the designs. Some of like the gowns and stuff, I mean jackets and coats could be, I think, quite desirable just in like, you know, the sort of luxuriation and like having these big swaths of fabric, right? Do you think in your character designs, like, you ever think about like how the character might feel in terms of like what they feel by putting on a particular pair of clothes, or is it like purely like another like abstraction of their motivations and of their conflict within a game?
I guess I haven't really had been able to think too much about that. Yeah, about like thinking about it from a person's like their choice to wear this. You know, yeah. I guess not really something that that has influenced my decision making too much.
I see. So there's obviously like
I'd understand that thought process for sure.
Sure. In terms of the collection, there's obviously a focus towards these light emitting, like technologically driven, like there's probably some sort of PCIe. I don't know, like what is like a Raspberry Pi refer to? Like a small computer, a microcomputer, that sort of thing that's driving these like light shows on the clothes. And that's something that like I think people since like the early 2000s have tried to sort of incorporate into this sort of prototype concept driven runway fashion that has never really made it to any successful degree to consumers, and or at least garments that one might be able to find at a reasonable price, right? What do you make of like the idea of wearable technology?
It feels I don't know. It's I had a when I was growing up, I actually had a shirt with like a you were supposed to like put a battery in your pocket, and it would like it was a shirt that like was a loading bar, like an old like Windows loading bar. So there's actually a built-in light into the shirt, and I just remember it was kind of uncomfortable, and I remember I was a kid, and the battery like sometimes it would kind of like come loose, and I would like touch the metal part of it, which was basically shocking me, but it was such like a tiny shock that it was kind of like interesting to me as a kid, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of tickled. But I don't know. I feel like there's definitely people that like wearing things that aren't comfortable, right? And I don't know if I mean, I'd imagine that these are a little bit more comfortable than my what I was basically. I had to carry a battery that was like about the size of like my iPhone now, and like larger than that. And that's a little awkward. I'm sure. Not like, you know, it's gotten a lot better. It's like it can be more concealed, a lot smaller, a little bit easier. It feels cyberpunk to me in a way, to have clothing that is that lights up.
Yeah, and that can't make it very safely through a washing machine.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like it doesn't feel like the kind of thing a common man would like to have, just because like the effort of cleaning it is less convenient, and once again, like I said, comfort, right?
Right. There is this idea that like especially even like with the, I think, lay people, there is this understanding that graphic tees are no longer cool. But there was like a while where like it was almost treated like as a disposable fast fashion, that you could just get a screen printed design on like a shirt, and like that might be something you use to sort of like proclaim some sort of identity or claim ownership of some kind of humor, right? And that's a sort of like disposable fast fashion is something that like people in the fashion community are all very vocal against these days, right? Everything has to like be like without text. Everything has to be very simple so that it can be part of like your wardrobe for, you know, basic daily living, where it doesn't feel like something you'd only wear like once for like a laugh and then put it either back in your closet or like it ends up in a landfill somewhere, right? So there's an element of like, if you could just change the design, the colorway, and the such of your shirt, that like it might be, even though it's got like LEDs in it, it might be somehow more sustainable because you could have a frivolous thought and like change the display of your clothes. Do you have any feelings about like this sort of idea of like using technology as a crutch to like kind of tell a narrative of like sustainability? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing with like traditional clothing, like sure, like there might be a lot of one-time shirts and stuff like that. And like sure, you can get tired of a design and never wear it again. But the kind of, I feel like it's a lot less. Although of course I wouldn't know. I feel like that's a lot less consequential if you just donate that or just throw it in the trash compared to, I guess if every person had like a shirt, like, or like a, you know, like an outfit that had all these different like lights and like batteries built in to power that, all the tech junk that you would have from a kid growing up and like having one when they're 12 and then having to get another one when they're 14, and then, you know, they've gone through all of these different sets of that kind of like LED dress by the time they're like 20. I feel like that would probably be more wasteful.
Yeah. You were speaking about cyberpunk earlier, and the what that last shot was of like them turning into like a dead television channel on some literal neuromancer cyberpunk shit. I thought that was like a cool conjoinment of what we were talking about and what we were looking at. There was a movement a few years ago of the sort of 3D modeling space being taken over by finance bros with a Web 3.0 like push. Not necessarily NFTs, but the idea of paying for digital fashion. I highly doubt you were involved in any of that, but were you ever approached by anybody in that community? Do you know anybody who was approached by anybody in that community or was affected in any way by those kinds of
not particularly. No, I feel like I mean, back when I was you know, I studied computer science at a university, so I've talked so much with tons of different people about like blockchain and like crypto bullshit. And it was kind of funny to me, like, you know, like to me back then. But generally, like most of the artists I know are kind of like staunchly against like using their work for NFTs or whatever. I think I've kind of, as an artist, I think I kind of came into it late. After like, you know, like crypto falling and all that stuff like that. By the time that I really had my own visual style. I've never really been approached by those kind of people.
Yet. You haven't been approached by those people yet.
No, I haven't yet. I guess, you know,
it's
they're
totally
still
not
around.
in vogue anymore, and it's kind of like a sort of signifier of bad taste to be kind of associated with that sort of thing, because even the rich know it's gauche to talk about money in that manner, right? About,
I think it's like a, I don't know, it's just the way that it's kind of become like commoditized, I guess. Like when you put it like that, it's just kind of a little gross for a lot of us. And like, I don't know, I feel like the kind of people that are more interested in it aren't really I don't know, they feel there's a word, Philistine. They feel like Philistines to me. Like they don't get the art, and they're just kind of there because they see other people that enjoy the art, and so they think it's like something like to be sold like a businessman, and it's that it feels like a lack of taste, I think. Yeah.
But there's like definitely I think some degree of like wanting to like have fashion and clothes and characters exist in like a digital cyberspace. I think
Hmm.
the reason why I'm asking you this is because like you're a VTuber, you kind of exist and kind of uh, interact with people in your community as like a 3D form, and you may or may not like collaborate with other people who do the same in like
Hmm.
shared digital spaces, right? So like, do you have any
It
like
is kind of
thoughts
like my
about
own
like
metaverse in a way.
yeah, exactly. Like, do you have an
Hmm.
idea about like the metaverse and like the idea of like how philosophically interacting with like digital avatars is versus like
Hmm.
in real life?
Well, it is kind of interesting. I'm not against like the selling of like selling digital T-shirts, for example. Plenty
Mhm.
of people do that. Especially with I think the thing is like a lot of these like Web3 people particularly are coming in off of buzzwords when in reality metaverses do exist. They've existed since Second Life. Most prominently, I think, are Roblox and VR chats. Um, and in something like VR chat, for example, you have 3D artists of all different kinds that make these avatars for people, and some people will spend time building outfits, and then they'll sell those outfits online, usually through Japanese websites, because it's a very Japanese dominated, I guess like hobby. Um, and so they'll sell like 3D models online, and people will like be like, I have my own like VR chat avatar. I'm going to buy this outfit. I get that file, and then I model that on my character. I just like fit it, and then I export that to VR chat. And so it's um, kind of interesting that way, where it's like it is a little bit more elaborate than I go to a department store and I buy something.
Mhm.
There's there's a customization part of it, because I can buy a sweatshirt model, and then I can alter it to have any design I want if I know how to texture art.
Yeah,
I can color it any way I want. It's like there's a lot of mutation,
yeah.
which is kind of interesting.
I think the reason why like a lot of big fashion companies like pairing with Gucci and them like sort of in Balenciaga, I think did an entire collection for Fortnite and I think a Chinese Need for Speed mobile game is that a lot
Okay.
of interaction these days because we were
Hmm.
discussing this in yesterday's stream where I talked about the closure of Forever 21 due to I think death of the American Mall. That
Oh wait,
was
it's like it's closed down.
well, it's
That
not
Forever
completely
21.
closed down, but they went under a bankruptcy. They got bought, I think,
Okay.
by like a group of investors who wanted to like turn it into like a more of a platform type deal, like Shein, but that didn't pan out.
Sure.
And now it's their second round of bankruptcy, and if nobody buys it,
Oh no.
yeah. Well, apparently they're active internationally. It's not just an American chain, but they were founded in America by like a Korean couple. I didn't know, but Forever 21 is
Hmm.
Korean. But Forever 21, like all the stores in America, all the huge stores with footprints in every mall that you can think of. But the reason why they were there was they were partly owned by the Simon Group, which is the big developer of malls here in the United States, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I've seen their name.
yeah, yeah. And all the American stores will completely fire sale, go out of business, shutter their store, and transfer their leases to anybody who will buy. It'll be a fire sale, like within a few months.
Mm.
But like due to the death of Third Spaces, again, the kind of like social interaction has all transported online, either into Discord or in a way where you can actually see something into VR chat. So I think the impulse from like Gucci and all these other companies to monetize that interaction and that way of socializing is a reasonable one, right? Like clothes are for
Hmm.
interacting and being social with people. You can dress up to go see people, and you spend money to do so. And the idea of like not just taking like a cookie cutter model off the shelf, but instead having one that's like actually done for you by Balenciaga is, I think, a story that is worth telling. Maybe not for like luxury prices, because I don't think like the typical, I think, consumer who interacts online because it's cheaper to do so than to go to a coffee shop or to movies, right? Like, I don't think that type of consumer is looking for that kind of luxury price point. But do you think it's viable that there could exist luxury at some point in 3D social spaces?
I mean, I think the thing is generally with digital. Oh wait, hold on. Why is my avatar is not using their mouth? Oh, that's. Oh wait, there you go. Hello. um, um, I think like it feels like it goes against the spirit of it a little bit. It would take a Mark Zuckerberg, a Meta, to like basically kind of make a monopoly on a digital space for people in order for a luxury brand to come in and do their thing. Kind of going back to actually Louis Vuitton specifically and League of Legends. They did so in League of Legends you can buy skins, right? That will like change the outfit of your character entirely, and because those are purely sold by the game, you only get what they sell you. There are people that have modded the game sometimes to use their own skins, but it's a multiplayer experience, and so oftentimes that's not actively supported. They will push changes that make modding impossible, or break modding in some way. So it's like almost like a similar fight to game developers and cheat makers. The way that they kind of have this war between supporting mods and breaking mods and going back and forth like that, so that people can't have their own, for example, dress their character the way that they want to. Only they can only be dressed in the way that the company wants you to be dressed. And
Especially
that
if
creates
like,
more
other
value for
players who don't have the mod downloaded and now suddenly see original.
Yeah, they wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you think that like
But
that's always going to be like a struggle from like the people who have the ability to like sort of be a punk, mod their own system, present like their own way of like expressing their character, versus they're eventually just being everything's DRM'd. You can't interact with people online unless it's through the graces of the publisher, right?
yeah, I don't know if that'll ever go away. It's kind of, we've definitely seen, I think, since the 2010s onwards, a big negative push by a lot of larger companies to kind of like no longer support those things. The earlier you go, there's a lot of support. Like I guess like in PC, for example, there used to be big modding communities around games like Counter-Strike, and like Team Fortress 2. But as that company has added loot boxes where you can get skins that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, they've banned those kind of systems. They've banned those kind of mods because there's value now into having cosmetics.
Well, but there's been since the beginning, right? Like famously, the first piece of DLC was a bit of fashion. It's a fashion accessory for your horse, right?
First server, yeah.
Yeah, so if, like fashion's been in the sort of this conversation from the beginning, but that's a single player experience. That's not a multiplayer experience. There's not really, like you said, this monopolistic third space quite yet. VR chat isn't really that much of a hit with the general population, I feel, because like kind of have to have specific like
VR is a niche too.
Yeah. But, like I think the closest you could get is like just the lobbies of like particular games. Like in Fortnite, you have to like watch somebody's like character jump up and down for a bit before the match starts, right? Like you're forced to interact with like the character on like just looking at their model, which I think is like why Balenciaga decided to work with him. Stuff like that is like actively not attack, but market to the lobbies directly versus like trying to find like another third space like the VR or 3D equivalent of Discord, right? I
mean, like something like Fortnite has a lot of people that play it. I think like I don't know too much about the attitude that players have towards that. Um, but I mean I know that I like me and my friends kind of think it's a little funny sometimes. Um, like seeing just like designer wear in our in games like that. Um, but like it does feel out of place sometimes, but it's kind of like we kind of like play into it like in like an ironic sense in a way. It does not it's not like we find it unwelcome. Oh, like this is kind of related. In Fortnite there's the Cybertruck was added, and a lot of people, some people liked it ironically, and some people, are not big fans of Elon Musk. So there were a lot of players that went out and would actively target anyone that was driving in a Cybertruck and would
Mhm.
blow up their car, which is a little dicey to talk about nowadays with what's actually happening with real Cybertrucks.
But like that's a tradition
Maybe.
all the way, like in single player
Mhm.
GTA games, is if somebody or like multiplayer GTA games, right? If somebody has like a luxury vehicle, you target the douche with the sniper rifle in the car, right? It's correct. It's how you grief. It's part of the culture of gaming, right? And how you interact with people when like the assets are digital. There is a sort of inherent disrespect for like, wow, you shelled out money for that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's especially for like games where the prices can get like so polarized on like games where you can actually buy items for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Um, there's like a community sentiment against like free to play players and what they call whales,
Mhm.
people that spend like exaggerated amounts of money. And like they kind of like turf war a bit. Some of it's kind of like genuine like flame against each other, and some of it's just more like a sports team type of deal.
Yeah.
Which I find the sports teaming kind of funny, so I play into that
Oh,
a
just
little
in
bit.
terms of like the free to play players versus like pay to win players.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so there is uh class distinctions already happening in digital spaces. They're
Yeah, and all
banding
these different
together
games.
against the bourgeois.
Even single player games. The gotcha game genre, for example, where like something like a Genshin Impact, where you basically gamble in order to get characters, and they get stronger the more duplicates you get of them, and so you can play it for free, or you can buy your way in. And I think that's the free to play versus whale thing is even more there. Funnily enough, even though it's like in these games you don't directly interact with each other very often, compared to a game like Fortnite where it's only PvP. But a game like Genshin Impact you don't, and it's just like kind of like you only know about that when you're talking online on like social media, and it's kind of interesting in a way.
Hmm. Okay. Um. Yeah, I'm talking about fashion and digital spaces. I think it would be like, just speaking personally, I think it would be interesting in a way to like kind of have a degree of customization and the idea of like having a digital accent almost to the way you interact with people, even if you're not like doing a 3D character, like even something as simple as like a profile picture, right? Like that's a way of expressing yourself, of expressing an attitude, of leading with some sort of a wall of your personality that one kind of sees before like you even get to the interactions. Do you think like that's like something that's going to be a a big part of like how you know? Well, I mean, this is sort of a leading question, but like it's definitely going to be a big part of like all interactions going forward from now on. And I think my question to you would be like, do you have any remarks about like kind of existing as like somebody who makes these ways of interacting with people, as a person who's an artisan of like models that like somebody might use to start their own community on Twitch and be a VTuber, and be like a way of of kind of defining themselves with your art.
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've thought about selling individual like what it would be like to be a VR chat artist that would sell like a T-shirt, for example. Um, I've thought about that as an avenue for myself to like do. I don't think I would mind doing that. I'm personally fine with making art and selling it like that, or making it tailor made for someone. Like I'm doing commissions, for example. It's not something that I disagree with in any way, but I'm also more interested in giving people the tools to do it themselves also. So I like doing education stuff. I like kind of helping people out and writing guides and things like that. So I mean, I don't know. I'd be a little bit weird where it's like I'd be selling my own stuff and also teaching people how to do it for free, which feels not particularly good from a business standpoint. But I think I'm reaching different crowds anyway, so it doesn't really bother me.
I mean, I don't think there's like anything. I think if you have like a strong brand as like an educator and as somebody who's like an expert, obviously, people feel great about purchasing art from you. So I don't think it's like a contradiction at all. Or if it is a contradiction, it's a dynamic one that only adds to like the strength of what you do. So
it could be, but it could like there is an argument where someone would like say it's like contradictory, I think. But generally, like what I find is like someone that's looking to buy art from me and someone that's trying to learn art from me are generally two different people.
I don't know. I think I could be the same kind of person. I'm the kind of guy.
There is a Venn diagram for sure, but I think on average, like if we're talking about like trying to make a living, it would be vastly different, like categories of people.
Right, definitely. There's there becomes like shareholders you have to appeal to, even if the shareholder is just you as a sole proprietorship, right?
Imagine like a board of directors, and they're like, "Oh, you need to move that vertex over. It doesn't look good, or whatever." And it's like, I'm not.
Yeah, but the board of directors is just like you in a TikTok sketch wearing a different outfit.
maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's all the questions that I had for you. I had planned. I'm looking at chat for the first time in a while. Hello, Corman. Hello, Pirsad. Great to see you in the chat. If you like what we have here today and would like to hear more of it, y'all should follow Magic Made. It's Magic Made Dev on Discord, right? I mean, not Discord, on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When do you normally stream?
I don't know. I try and aim for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'll usually do one of those three. And like some more. I don't have like a grounded schedule right now. Kind of just doing it casually, but as often as I can.
Nice. Well, I will post the link to their stream in the chat soon. I'll spam it a few times. Everybody go and follow them. Thanks for joining us for this call. So great to have you on as our first guest.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a lot of interesting things to talk about. Definitely. I kind of like talking about this sort of thing. And like also different aspects of like the realness, I guess, of it that I kind of it's not something I'm exposed to, but it's something I like to keep in mind. I think as an artist, or like it's like some of these clothings are like real clothing, so like trying to do that research and stuff like that. It's all interesting topics to me that I don't really get to be in that. I don't get to be in that world very often.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the 3D world at all, really, and it's super fascinating to hear your take on all this fashion stuff. All right, I'll let you go, and I'm gonna personally go on a watering break myself. Have a good one. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you for having me once more, and take care.
Yeah. All right, let's make sure we spam that link in the stream. There you go.